You stack that up over 6 years that I've been with some of these people, and you just get to know, just through that alone, you kind of get to know what's happening in people's lives and what they value. But then on top of that, I guess probably not quite a year ago.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to Evolving Your Workplace. I'm Carol Schultz. I have a favor to ask first, and if you aren't already following us on Spotify, now's the time to do so you can stay alerted with each and every new episode. So today I have a really interesting guest. I have a CEO here with me today to discuss the old school phrase, work is work, personal is personal, and why he believes it couldn't be further from the truth. I have Jimmy Rayford, CEO of Dealers Wholesale, with me today. And welcome to you, Jimmy. I've been looking forward to this. Before we get into today's topic, tell us a little bit about Dealers Wholesale and what you do.
First of all, thank you for having me, and I've been looking forward to this conversation as well. Dealers Wholesale is a building products company. We are installing distributor of building products based in Indianapolis. So our products are doors, frames, hardware, access control, and within new construction, multifamily, senior living, student living primarily. And then we also have a residential fireplace business. We have about 115 people in total. The bulk of those people are here in Indianapolis, about 85, and the remaining 30 or so are split evenly between our office in Wooddale, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, and Pewaukee, Wisconsin, not too far from the Milwaukee area. I've been
And
CEO since I've been
yeah,
CEO since January of 2020,
20.
so hard to believe I'm kind of coming up on 7 years here in the next few months, which is just staggering to believe that it's been that long already.
Is this the longest tenure you've ever spent anywhere?
It is. I crossed that mark. Once I hit 5 years, it was the longest tenure at a company. And even before that, it was the by far the longest single role
Mm-hmm.
that I've
Mm-hmm.
had really
Mm-hmm.
since the start of my career.
Well, let me ask you this in that case. What's kept you there this long? Like why, what's made the biggest difference for you?
This and I've said it, if I've said it once in the last few years, I've said it 100 times. This is the best time of my career. These last 6.5 years have by far been the best time of my career, and it's really the combination of impact. This is from the other things I've done in my career. This is the smallest company I've ever worked for, and that was by design, by intent, because I wanted to be at a place where like my work mattered, my decisions and the quality of my decisions
Mm-hmm.
matter, and I
Yeah.
can kind of see the positive impact that I've had
Mm-hmm.
here in the 6+ years I've been here. And then I also I love the culture
Mm-hmm.
that we're building and just enjoy coming to work every day.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The difference you can make in a smaller company than in a larger company. You know, I've always said, and maybe when you and I first spoke, I might have mentioned this is exactly why I've spent, other than the earliest parts of my career, why when I learned more about what I did, I really moved into the SMB space. It's just, you know, for somebody like me, and I think you are probably not dissimilar to me. You know, I'm driven by the opportunity to make a difference, right? And I just don't think
Yep.
I can make a difference in a big company.
It was interesting because I you don't know what you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, right.
So
The blind spot.
now being here,
Hmm.
I realized the amount of extra energy that I was spending working in larger organizations, navigating the bureaucracy, navigating
Hmm.
the office politics, and you spending more time, you know, selling your idea, uh, and kind of figuring out which way the wind is blowing as opposed to actually getting
Hmm.
impactful work
Hmm.
done. And now that I'm here, I realize like how much better this environment is for me than prior environments, even though I was, successful in climbing the corporate ladder
Hmm.
in those other environments.
Yeah. And I do want to mention that Dealers Wholesale has been in business since the early 60s.
Yep.
So, and
Yep.
what number CEO are you?
Ooh, that's a
Do you know?
great question. I don't know. I'm probably
How did you end up?
I'm in that 4 or 5. I'm in that 4, probably in that
Yep.
4 or 5, 4 or
Okay.
5 area.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And how did you? What happened to the CEO prior to you? Did that person retire?
This is a very interesting story. So the company was acquired about
Mm,
11 years ago now, about 11 years ago. So we actually just did a transaction in December
mm,
of last year, but prior to that, it had been acquired. And the CEO that got promoted was like the longest tenured guy. It was like the guy that would be like the natural person to
mm-hmm,
get promoted,
mm-hmm.
and it didn't work out. And
Yeah.
him and the ownership group came to a mutual decision that it wasn't working.
Yeah.
But here's the fantastic part. He stayed and he works for me today.
Oh, interesting.
And it has been a from day one, it has been a phenomenal relationship because I could go to him and ask him questions that nobody else in the
Yeah. Right.
organization could answer, because it would be like ownership questions or board of
Mm-hmm.
directors questions, and he was always accessible. And when
Mm-hmm.
I asked for his feedback, he would give his feedback. But if I
Mm-hmm.
didn't ask, he didn't ever force it on me. So he and I have a unique relationship
Yeah.
uh, in the organization that we both value. He's a company guy. He's worked here, I think, for 38 years.
Wow.
38 years now. So he's also the example for me of
Mm-hmm.
what being a company guy means and
Mm-hmm.
what humility means.
Well, especially in a time when there is virtually nothing left and no such thing as a company guy anymore,
Hmm.
right?
That's exactly right.
I was just reading an article, in fact, before this about, how, and I mean, I don't need to read an article to know this, that, there's really no such thing as, very infrequently do you find somebody staying with a company for any great length of time anymore. And it's, I think, ultimately because companies are not loyal to their people, right? They're
Yeah,
loyal to their profits. If they're publicly traded, of course, they're loyal to their investors, and that's about the only people they're loyal to.
I started my career with IBM, and
Mhm.
was like my vision of my career when I started with IBM back in 1997 was the 30-year gold watch career.
Right. Yeah.
And in my first professional department meeting, my peers was asking our manager if we needed to be shopping our resumes. So I got a super early lesson that
Yeah.
had to be flexible and
Mhm.
stay light on my feet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, companies have really caused this to happen where people don't stay
Yeah.
with them very long anymore. So, I'd like to think that we are turning that tide, or that many CEOs are turning that, because they realize that, the costs at replacing
Mm.
people, time is money, and it costs not only time, but it does cost money to replace people, to train them, get them up to speed. So, you kind of have to look at, well, really what's the best, smartest way to do things.
Yep.
So, at what point did you start to focus on bringing personal aspects into your workplace?
I would say by and large is when I came here
Yeah.
to Dealers Wholesale. Prior to that, I had worked for mentors and organizations that it was pretty clear that, work was work, personal was personal. Obviously, that didn't,
Mhm.
stop people from forming relationships and getting to know more about people, but it wasn't necessarily kind of embedded into like the fabric
Mhm.
of the culture. And when I came, one of the reasons why I decided that I was interested in being a CEO as opposed to being like, the right hand man to a person in charge,
Mhm.
was because I wanted to really drive culture.
Mhm.
And for me, I think a part of it has been just growing older, right? When you're
Mhm.
when you're younger, in some ways, it becomes easier to check the things at the door because there's not as much to check at the door.
Mhm.
But as you get older and get more experience, and life experiences, to me, it's really no such thing. People don't really check it
Mm.
at the door and have this line. You just set up an environment where people are suppressing and pretending like life issues aren't happening, and
Mhm.
it's going to impact the work and show up one way or the other. The question is, can we can they show up in a productive way just based off of openness and transparency.
Right.
And so I don't even know if I came here with like that intent that that's what the way I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in some ways, me coming right at the beginning of COVID, that also invited it in. But in COVID, I mean, people kind of forget now, but in the early days of COVID, like people were concerned about, life and death and what
That's
this was
right.
going to mean. So that actually brought me in a way where, like, for a while, I think my role was chief reassurance officer. And
Right.
I remember going through a stretch of probably 3 or 4 months where every day I sent a morning email to the organization that was designed to be like an uplifting, optimistic email, just so
Mm-hmm.
if everything they were taking was uncertainty, negativity, panic, that at least they
Mm-hmm.
got something from someone else that spoke to them in a different way. So that being the introduction to the organization, I've actually never even really thought about it in this way until
Mm-hmm.
just now. I think that immediately got me into the personal, let's take care of each other's space. And then it just stayed there. I just look for other ways to bring it in after that.
Well, and how was the response from your employees on that? Because, a lot of people, it's funny, I was in a meeting with one of my clients last week. It was an all hands meeting. There were a few people in that meeting who they just wouldn't talk. They wouldn't say anything. I did what I could, as did the CEO, to encourage them, but they just kind of sat in their corner and didn't. And this is something that, of course, does not happen overnight, but
You know,
it's still a thing that we have to deal with. So I'm curious if you encountered that and what you did about that.
my view on that is accepting people where they are,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? Some folks are still of that mindset
Yeah.
that nope, it's more of a line for them,
Mhm.
and that's not a problem. And I'm not ever trying to put someone in a position where they're forced to share in a way that feels like they're oversharing.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just want to create an environment of to whatever your level of comfort is in terms of letting people in and sharing, that the environment is welcoming of
Right.
that, but doesn't force that.
Right. And we in our prior conversation we talked a little bit about this, but what's your best technique that you can share with leaders to get their employees to share personal aspects in the workplace?
Model the behavior that you're looking for.
Yeah, very good. Right.
So I literally have been in staff meetings. Like I remember one particular offsite meeting. We do quarterly offsite
Mhm.
meetings, and I had just gotten some troubling news from back home that had me just like in a really bad emotional
Mm,
space. That if I didn't get it out, I was not going to be able to
yeah.
have a productive
Yeah,
productive
yeah,
meeting.
you couldn't be
And we
present.
generally exactly, and
Yeah.
we open our meetings with asking people just to share good news.
Mhm.
In this particular
Yeah.
meeting, we had a truth soccer ball. It's one of these balls, and it's got different questions on it.
Oh, I
And
love it.
I picked a question intentionally that gave me an avenue to share with them
Mm,
what was happening that was
mhm.
troubling me, and I'm bawling. And that obviously
Mhm.
everybody doesn't have to do that, and everybody
Right.
won't do that,
Correct.
but that clearly shows that there's a permission structure in the organization to be able to show up that way. So the starting point is you can't tell people to be open, be transparent,
Mhm.
you know, and everything they see about
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
is closed.
Yep.
So that's the starting point for leaders is model
Yep.
what you want,
Yep.
model the behavior that you're
Yeah.
trying to drive.
I say amen to that because that's exactly how I feel. Right. I'm always sharing, not always, it depends. I'm often sharing personal things with clients and their employees because, if I'm okay sharing those things, my hope is that they'll eventually be okay to get those things off your chest. And I have to say, I've always felt that a man who cries is let me get the words right on this. I mean, it's sexy, it's powerful, It's authentic, it's vulnerable, it's all those things, right? And, because you don't often see men cry. And I'm
Yeah,
wondering, you personally, what it is about you, or is it the family you grew up in that accepted those kind of emotions? Because it's just not as common among men as it is among women.
it's definitely not. I would not say it's the family I grew up in. I'm kind of old school Southern family, just kind of traditional. Rub some dirt on it. What I would say though is, and I'm not embarrassed to say it. I'm probably just more naturally a a sensitive person.
Yeah.
So and I've been that way as far as memory takes me. And I think now it's just the older I get, the more comfortable in my skin
Mhm.
that I am. So if I have something that's bothering me to the point that it's moving me to this emotional reaction, then so be it. In some ways, and oh, by the way, it would take much more energy to suppress those things than it does just to
Mhm.
let it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You had told me a story when we first talked that I'd like you to tell me again, to tell the audience about you were having a meeting. It was one of your female employees. Gosh, I'm trying to remember. She told a story. So it's something that was happening with her. I think somebody had died in her family, or it was some. Do you remember? I
Her
could be wrong
family.
about that.
I don't think so.
Ugh.
Is it the story that I was telling that kind of moved you to emotion when we were
Yes,
meeting?
that was it.
I think what it was, different track, but I think what it was is I was walking you through my decision point that said that this was the right role for me to take as I was
Hmm.
going through
Hmm.
the negotiating process. And
Right.
I was leaving a really good role with a career long mentor and friend for a clear step up in
Right.
responsibility and position, but
Hmm.
not necessarily that level of step up in terms of compensation, just going to a smaller company.
Hmm.
So I did some negotiating with the ownership group, but we kind of got to the point where, they made it clear, like, you're our guy, but we've kind of gone as far as we
Yeah, we
can
can
go.
go. Yeah.
And it just so happened that I remember leaving their office, I think the day before, somehow or another, I came across a picture of my uh, of my grandfather's tombstone,
Mm,
and like the time that I would have been starting the role in this role would have been like, 100 years to the time, but he was born.
mm,
And my grandfather really, I would say through no fault of his own, just kind of growing up as a black man in the South. I mean, he just
mhm.
worked. He just worked,
Right.
and his schooling got cut short, and he never learned how to read or write. And the
Mm,
thing that was sticking in the back of my mind and kind of really made me say, okay, this is the right time for me,
mhm,
is just thinking through, almost 100 years to when he was born, that his grandson had an opportunity to become CEO of this well thought of organization, and
mm,
just what that time frame and just thinking through it through that lens represented for me was like, I saw that picture for a reason,
mhm,
and that I took that as my sign that this is the right one.
mhm, mhm. Do you find yourself, having weekly or monthly, I know you said quarterly you have offsites, but, more frequently in the office where you get together with different employees, or, have a once a week, anybody who wants to kind of come to this, we can have a conversation meeting?
Yeah, what we do, we have a series of staff meetings. We run on EOS, so we have L10. That's like
Yeah.
our department meeting. So depending on the meeting, they can happen either weekly or biweekly. And as a part of those meetings, like I said, our segue for those meetings are typically, give me something good that's
Yeah.
happened professionally or
Mhm.
or personally
Yeah.
in the last week. So everyone who sits in a meeting like that has that opportunity to share, and
Mhm.
you stack that up over 6 years that I've been with some of these people, and you just get to know, just through that alone, you kind
Yeah.
of get to know what's happening in people's lives and what they value. But then on top of that, I guess probably not quite a year ago, we started doing personal growth Mondays. So
That's right.
every Monday morning here in the office at 8:30 and then virtually at 9:30, anybody can come in, and we have this book written by Brett Ledbetter. It's the 365 question
Mm.
book, and these are 365 deep questions.
That
Like
was the conversation we had.
these are
Yeah.
not what's your favorite food,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
favorite food
Yep.
type of questions.
Yep.
And anyone can come in. It's purely voluntary, and we all individually pick a question, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll be in pay. Just depending on the size of the group, we'll break off in pairs, or if it's a smaller group, we'll all stick together, and then you're basically just sharing out whatever your answer is
Mm-hmm.
to typically very personal and emotional questions, and we call that personal growth Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I get as much out of it as anybody else. That's one of those things where, going back to your earlier question, I
Yeah.
just have to accept that timing is everything, and you're going
Mm-hmm.
to have early adopters, and you're going to have
Yes.
late adopters, and you
Yeah.
have no adopters. So I always view in situations like that, instead of focusing on the people who aren't there
Yes.
and figuring out how to get more people there, I focus on whomever chooses to come, make that 30 minutes be some of
Mm-hmm.
their highest value time of the week to get the week started.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about. You had told me a story
Okay.
about somebody who had shared something, and it was one of your female employees, and for life of me, I can't remember what the story was, but I think that's such a great way. And to your point, there's always going to be some no adopters, some zero adopters, right? But the people who are the early adopters and that are the current adopters, if you want to call them that are coming to these meetings, they're going to model it to people. And they may model it to the no adopters,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
And that's partly, people think about leadership in many different ways. They think about leadership as just the leaders, and I don't just think about it like that. I mean, yeah, that's important, but that's also showing leadership with your peers, showing that vulnerability or talking about this great thing. And, gosh, this person shared this. And boy, you know what? I realized there was something in a blind spot for me. And I learned this,
Yeah.
and that
And that
helps people who aren't coming along maybe at all or more slowly, I think start to, at least in my experience, start to, move in the direction that you'd like to see them go.
absolutely. And I think even when I think there's a subconscious element to it
Mm,
as well, because if you're participating in that meeting and you're sharing and you're listening to other people share
mm-hmm,
like these highly, personal things that have happened in their lives,
mm-hmm,
I think subconsciously it makes you more open and sensitive as a leader to looking for things that might be happening to your team inside of your team.
mm-hmm,
And whereas if you're not hearing that, you could be more of an old school mentality, but participating in it, I think that just starts seeping into your subconscious, and you you almost can't help but lead in a different way when you're involved in
mm-hmm.
that sort of activity.
Yeah. If you look back now on the past 6.5 years that you've been with Dealers Wholesale, what would you say is, talking about all the things we've talked about so far, is still a challenge for you, if there is anything?
I think I am two. I'll answer in two ways. I am a introvert by nature. So left to my own devices, I can sit for a disproportionate time alone or with a really small group
Yeah.
of people.
Yeah.
So the thing that I have to continue to remind myself and challenge myself on,
Mm.
um, is get out,
Mm-hmm.
get out more, touch people more, walk more. I like doing those things, and when I do it, it's not like I get back to my office like, oh my God, that was so miserable for me.
Yeah.
It's just I have to light my fire to go do it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I won't do it. So that's something that
Mm-hmm.
I stay ever cognizant of. And I
Yeah.
think the second thing for me is when I look at and this is a double-edged sword. When I look at people, like see you as the father that I know you are, as the spouse
Mm-hmm.
that I know you are, the mom that I know you are. So sometimes, because of that, it can take me longer than it should to make a difficult person decision, because even if you're not showing up the way that you should be showing up, and even if I know you've been talked to about it, and we've given you every opportunity, I still think about, how is this person going to pay their bills if
Mm-hmm.
they lose their job here?
Yeah.
And
Go on.
I would rather be that way than be on the other end of the
Yeah.
spectrum of just like not caring about it, and you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta go. But I can, because of that, I know I can be susceptible to
Mm-hmm.
second, third, fourth, fifth chances when folks are showing me and telling me that they're not going to do what they need to do.
Yeah, that's like you said, it's a double-edged sword. It's can be very challenging because you are running a business, right?
Hmm.
And you know you need to make a profit for your investors, the private equity firm who owns you now. And yet you want to be human or humane by nature,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it does present challenges. I've got another client like this who he's just the greatest guy ever. And he's got somebody right now that he needs to fire. And we're working on, I mean, we're doing a confidential replacement right now. We're working on that for him. But, it's not like the employee hasn't been spoken to. They know he's out interviewing. And when I was first out there 2.5 months ago, when I started my engagement with them, somebody had mentioned to me about this particular guy and some things that he was doing. And I said, I thought somebody had told me that he was out interviewing, and the CEO reminded me, no, you're the one who suggested he was likely out interviewing, looking for a job. I said, yeah, well, that would make more sense, I guess. I hadn't really thought about it. And, it's interesting because, listen, if the person's out interviewing, we can't be responsible for anything else, right? Because it's not fair for them to get caught with their pants down. Guy
Right.
quits, and then they're like, oh, shit, we don't have anybody to replace this person. So it's really a very fine line about, how and when you do this. And, I mean, I guess that's my question is, how many chances should we be giving someone? I mean, my answer is always going to be, it depends, but
Yeah.
how many chances do we give someone till we realize, what, this is hurting us, and make the decision to say, look, we're putting you on a 30-day plan,
Yeah. I mean,
which
I'd
is going to
answer it the
get them
same
looking for
way.
a job, or they're going to shape up real quick.
Yeah, I mean, it depends is the right answer. It depends
Mhm.
on,
Yeah.
what is the issue that's causing them to miss the mark, because
Mhm.
all issues aren't created the same. I
Yeah.
know for me, like, what I know that I have to do to make sure that it's balanced, I have to make sure that there's people in my leadership team
Mhm.
that balance me out,
Mhm.
that balance me out, and that there's a permission structure for them to tell me, like, Jimmy, you're being soft on this one. No. So that's important. I think the other thing that I've learned too is, particularly in a company of this size,
Mhm.
like, there's an I know most of the people,
Mhm.
which means that I can be getting myself down involved at levels of the organization that I should not even be involved in, because I have a relationship.
That's
So I
right.
also have to make sure, so I have, a balanced leadership team that
Mhm.
can call each other out and
Mhm.
call me out on things like this. And I have to know when I'm actually involving myself in something that I
You
do not
shouldn't
need to
be.
be involved in, and
Yeah.
just remove myself from that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because, that's so common among CEOs and founder CEOs, that they end up becoming, and I mean, I think you're cognizant of this, right? That they end up becoming the bottleneck in their own company, right?
Yeah.
Because they're spending time in areas they have no business spending their time in,
Right.
because there are
Right.
perfectly capable people that should be doing this for you. I mean, your job is to spend 90% of your time or more leading your company, being the visionary, doing, what it takes to scale your company, grow your company, right? And empowering those who are directly beneath you, first of all, empowering them to go do their jobs. And then, of course, empowering the people who work for them to go do that work, right? That's how it needs to be done. I mean, this almost sounds negative to say this, but you need to give people enough rope to hang themselves, right?
Yeah.
But that's really what it is. You have to give them the rope to potentially hang themselves. And, most of the time they're not going to hang themselves. And if they do, well, then we'll figure out why they did it. And what do we need to put in place so that doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I mean, and all decisions aren't created equally,
Of course.
right? And people get different amount of rope, right?
Yeah.
If you're a proven leader, and I know how you think through things and
Hmm.
the quality of decisions.
Hmm.
You have a lot of latitude and a lot of rope, and then I'll trust that you'll come to me when
Yeah.
you need me. I mean, if you're new to the organization, unproven, and you're faced with a high impact decision, then you're not going to get nearly as much rope. And then I'm probably
Yeah.
going to be involved in that in a way that fast forward 5 years later, exact same situation. I'm not
Right.
as involved. So
Hmm.
having that situational leadership style, I think helps navigate that for me
Hmm.
too.
If you had to identify one thing, if solved, would make the biggest impact on your business growth, what would that be? Or is it
Ooh,
something we've already talked about?
one thing if solved, I think our internal training programs.
Hmm.
I think there's an opportunity for us to get better. And everyone
Hmm.
feels like you can't talk to anybody that won't describe themselves as some specialized niche, hard to find industry.
Yeah.
Everybody
Hmm.
thinks that they're so unique. But I think for us, our ability to build a world class training
Hmm.
organization would then make it easier for us to hire people, because we're not looking for these specialized,
Yeah.
already 90% trained folks.
Hmm.
I think it would make it easier for us to make some of those difficult people decisions that
Hmm.
you don't make as quickly because you're afraid that you're not going to be able to replace them. So I
Hmm.
think building a world class training and cross training program across the entirety of our company
Yeah.
would allow us to operate at a faster, more efficient pace.
Yeah. Interesting. Finally, is there anything that I haven't brought up, I haven't asked you, we haven't talked about that you feel is worth talking about before we sign off?
Yeah, I think for me, and kind of goes back to a little bit to where we started
Yeah.
with this being the best 6.5 years of my career.
Hmm.
I think I would just encourage anybody who sees this to really take the time to evaluate what's really important to
Yeah.
you, because one of the times is most clearly that I evaluated what's important to me is when I decided that I wanted to be the CEO of an organization, and I put down on paper the company
Yes.
criteria of
Mm.
what's important to me. Prior to that, I was getting promoted within organizations,
Yeah.
doing things that I felt like I needed to do to get to where I needed to go. But I don't know that I had really taken a true inventory of here's who I am, here's the type of work that I want to do, and here's the environment that I think is going to allow me to flourish. So
Mm.
just encouraging, that self assessment, and look for or create those environments that really
Yes.
truly bring out the best work in you.
Yeah. Well, I don't need to put I can put an exclamation point on that. I have nothing more to say. So that's Jimmy Rayford, CEO of Dealers Wholesale. Thanks so much for being with me today. I am always so happy to talk to any truly authentic leader who's just really committed to his or her, team and how they flourish. So I want to really thank you for spending time with me today.
I appreciate it. This has been wonderful. I love this topic, and you obviously made it easy to talk to. So thank you.